I'm mad because all season I heard that Tennessee signed the second coming at quarterback. He was worth $8 million, respectively. But he may not even be the starting quarterback for the Vols this season. Let's talk about it.
Welcome into College Football Today. He's the coach, Carl Reed. I'm Emily Proud. If you aren't already, make sure you are subscribed to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. That's the only way you can be a part of the chat. I'm checking it out right now. We already got some questions. We got people talking about hitting that like button. Listen to those people. They are very smart. Go ahead, hit that like button. We would love to hear from you throughout the show today. We got a lot to talk about, but first, Carl, I got to ask you, obviously you're referring to Nico Iamaleava, the Vols quarterback commit, the number 2 player in this past cycle. So if he does not start this season, what needs to happen to make that $8 million figure worth it?
Man, he better start the next season. I mean, anytime you talk, we saw it with Quinn Ewers at Ohio State. It's just a lot of money to give the guys that aren't playing. And, we've had a lot of different perspectives on NIL. I'm a fan of NIL. I think it's okay for players to get their market value, but I really believe it's very similar to what the veterans in the NFL complained about years ago when instituted the rookie salary cap. You have guys coming into college that haven't proven anything, and they're getting paid boatloads of money to sign with a school, and then they're not necessarily contributing on the field right away. And I don't know if that's good.
All right, we'll see what happens with that. We're talking a lot of Tennessee on the show today. I'm sure we will dive back into this topic. We got an expert joining us who is in Knoxville. He will give his perspective in just a little bit. But first, let's hit some spring intel headlines. The first, unfortunately, some injury news out of Ohio State. That's running back TreVeyon Henderson has yet to return to the practice field after a foot injury early in the 2022 season. Now, Ryan Day said he is, quote, dying to get out there, but is not quite ready and doesn't know if he will be for spring ball. Carl, what's the concern level here?
I don't have a concern level. I don't think he needs to play in the spring. We know this is a big time back. Let him get healthy. There's no need for him to take unnecessary punishment. The shelf life on a running back is already short. Let us get him to the season healthy because Ohio State has plans to compete for a national championship, and that's the expectations. They don't need to win spring ball.
100%. He did have surgery, said he barely practiced all season. So rest up, get ready to go for 2023. All right, the concern level definitely higher, though, for this next headline. Florida State will be without starting wideout Micah Pittman for the majority of the offseason and potentially part of the 2023 season. He will undergo surgery on his left hip to repair a torn labrum. The expectation is that he will miss 4 to 6 months. High expectations for the Seminoles this year. Carl, how big a hit is this?
This is a huge hit because you don't know how you'll respond to this from a mobility and change of direction standpoint. Micah Pittman is definitely in the plans for Florida State in terms of having a team that they expect to be in the college football playoffs. So it is an injury that keeps you out a long time. I think it's something that you have to be cautious with. Is he back in 6 months? Or is he back in September, October? He's a big part of their football team. But I do think that they've recruited well enough and they have enough depth to overcome this.
Yeah, Johnny Wilson coming back is obviously a big deal. They've also improved tremendously in the tight end position. So less concerned about the depth, but this is a special talent. Hopefully he gets back on the field soon. To more positive news, more positive wide receiver news, Texas's Xavier Worthy is back to practicing full speed. You might be wondering, back from what exactly? Well, Sark said that Worthy was actually playing with a broken hand the second half of the season. He was in a cast for the last 8 weeks, but Sark kept the injury behind closed doors because he said, I didn't have to tell opponents and they didn't have to know. So, Carl, how often does something like this happen?
Coaches are really tight-lipped on injuries. I think it explains a lot. Xavier Worthy dropped a lot of balls at the end of the season, especially 4 big drops in the bowl game. I think the receiver position is a really tough one to play with a broken hand. Sark comes from the school of coaches with guys like Pete Carroll, guys like Nick Saban that also wouldn't release injuries. It's very common for a coach. to not release the injury status of one of his star players.
Can't do that in the NFL, but in college, you don't have to. Why not? Hey, some high praise for new USC receiver Dorian Singer. Trojans wide receiver coach Dennis Simmons said that the Arizona transfer is, quote, better than I would have initially given him credit for. Carl, translate that for us. What is he saying here?
Arizona was a bad football team. So when you have a player like this, you don't know what you're getting sometimes. You can put up a lot of numbers in some blowout games, but you don't know if he can necessarily step in and be a big-time player. So what he's basically saying is this kid is better than what I thought he was going to be. And I think that that's a very good thing for USC as they look to make a major move towards the college football playoffs.
Certainly going to look good when you have a guy like Caleb Williams, the Heisman Trophy winner, throwing you some passes that will certainly elevate your game. Let's get to our main story today, and that is the University of Tennessee. I actually caught up with the head coach, Josh Heupel, late last week. We're going to start with the draft conversation because we talked about it. I mean, it's been some time since Tennessee has had this many headliners going into an NFL draft. Not that long ago, Carl, no players from the University of Tennessee were hearing their name called in the NFL draft. And so I asked the coach about just how exciting it is to watch this group in particular take that step to the next level.
Yeah, there's nothing better than seeing kids, I say kids, players, young men have the opportunity to continue to chase their dreams, and the hard work, the energy that they've put into, wearing the power tee on the side of their helmet and creating the bonds that they have inside of the program. Now they get a chance to fast forward and chase their next dream, which is playing at the next level. We had a bunch of guys at the Combine. We got a huge pro day coming up here at the end of March. A lot of guys that will be wearing NFL helmets next fall and competing on the highest stage. Really proud. And I said this to our staff the other day with some of the performances that our guys had at the Combine. It's a tip of the cap, and I'm just really proud of what our staff has done. That's our strength staff, our nutrition staff, and our training room, and our assistant coaches, of helping these guys develop and have the opportunity to go chase their highest goals and dreams and perform on the biggest of stages during this process in a really positive way and put their best foot forward. Excited to see these guys here at the end of March back home here in Knoxville and compete at their pro day. And I know a bunch of them are going to have a great draft day as well.
All right, I didn't just ask him one question. The rest of that interview will be airing a little bit later in the show, but we have to introduce our guests here. We're talking NFL draft, so why not bring in CBS Sports NFL draft analyst Chris Trapasso is here on the show. And if we're talking Tennessee, we got to go to Knoxville. Wes Rucker from GoVols 24/7 is here as well. Let's start with the NFL side of things and show your mock draft here, Chris. We showed a few Tennessee players who could hear their name called in April, but this is your first round mock draft. The only UT player you have up there is Darnell Wright, going 19th to the Bucs. Now, this would be the first round pick for the University of Tennessee since 2017. Defensive end Derek Barnett heard his name called that year in the first round. So, Chris, my first question to you is, you take a look at Darnell Wright as a prospect. It's not just that he could be Tennessee's top prospect in this draft. He's also one of their fastest risers. So what is it about him as a prospect that's seen him rise up the draft board so quickly in this process?
Well, Darnell Wright is actually my offensive tackle number one. I have him going below a few of the other bigger names like Paris Johnson from Ohio State and Broderick Jones from Georgia. But I think to answer your question, Emily, 6'4", 6'5", 340 plus pounds, plays a lot more mobile than that. His athleticism that he showcased, not just at the Senior Bowl, but then at the Combine, really opened the eyes of scouts, a lot of teams, and draft analysts like myself. And then you watch Darnell Wright on film over the past 2 seasons, and you think at that size, he's going to be slow-footed, he's going to be a masher, but he's actually a very nuanced pass protector. His handwork, I think, is as good as any offensive tackle in this class. So we've long been enamored with left tackle or right tackle, but in today's NFL, you got to have 2 good tackles given how many outstanding outside pass rushers there are. I think Darnell Wright is the most NFL-ready pass protector who can come in, and he's not going to get overpowered by the strength that he's going to see given his size.
Yeah, I think Darnell Wright's a guy who if you remember when he was a prospect, this was a big time prospect. This was a 5-star prospect who everybody in the country wanted. And then you get a situation where he doesn't play that great early in his career. People, and I did this too, said, is he really this good? Is he going to be that good? And then the season, the last couple of years happened, and my goodness, I mean, the film he put up this season, what he did against Alabama just in that one game. I mean, Will Anderson said it was the best offensive lineman he faced all season, and I think the film shows that out. Anderson didn't do a lot in that game, maybe just a couple of pressures. The only thing that you could say about this young man that you would question is he doesn't have huge hands, right? He doesn't have huge hands for an offensive tackle. But other than that, he's got everything else you could possibly want. Doesn't surprise me that it took him a couple years, even as a 5-star from West Virginia, not the best high school football playing state in the country. Needed a couple years. Once he got those, he really took off.
It's all right. He's not a quarterback, so he doesn't need the gigantic hands. We don't have. And crazy, this wasn't a huge story coming out of the combine. Usually, it's all about the hand size and everything.
It was the first thing when I saw. I went, wow, they're that small. I've talked to this kid for 5 years. I didn't know they were that small.
Interesting. Well, speaking of great hands, though, Tennessee has 2 awesome wide receivers hitting the draft this year. Excited to see where Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman go. But the question surrounding them is the type of offense that they both played in, and that those numbers are through the roof. Both spectacular talents. But Chris, how much stock do these evaluators actually put into the type of offense that they played in college?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And we certainly are seeing more of these air raid, completely spread offenses in college football that are then certainly sending those prospects to the NFL. Teams are more okay with it now from the people I've talked to in the league. But in terms of looking at statistics and touchdowns, they understand there are huge throwing windows in this Tennessee offense, which certainly was very successful for Hendon Hooker, was a big reason why he had such a high touchdown to interception ratio, and Tennessee had its best season in a very long time. Looking at stats, though, translating to the next level, teams kind of grade on the curve and say, okay, with Cedric Tillman, with Jalen Hyatt, crazy big numbers in terms of receiving yards and touchdowns, like I said, not going to necessarily translate right away in that regard, because there's not too many offenses, especially with Cliff Kingsbury not a head coach anymore in the NFL, that are going to have such wide splits that Josh Heupel has and run 4 verticals as frequently as he does.
I think that's a problem that we used to have in yesteryear. Football now is more wide open. It's more quarterback friendly. It's shorter verbiage. Guys that come from an offense like Heupel runs can have a lot of success in the National Football League. But NFL teams are still going to look at traits. They're going to look at route running. They're going to look at true speed. They're going to look at size. They're going to look at how you fit. They're going to throw the numbers out because the numbers can be inflated because of the type of offense that you play. But if you have the traits to play in the National Football League, there's still going to be room for a player regardless of the system that he came out of.
Wes, if you're talking to some fans of NFL teams out there that could potentially draft one of these 2 wide receivers, what do they need to know about the type of talents they're getting?
I'll put it this way. I really like Jalen Hyatt, and I still think Cedric Tillman could end up being a better pro. I do. I think Cedric Tillman is a guy who, people talk about Hyatt winning the Biletnikoff. Tillman was the guy who going into the season was supposed to be the guy who might win the Biletnikoff. Cedric Tillman is big. He is physical. He can run. There is no 50-50 ball when it's near him. It's at least a 70-30 ball. He is, I think, going to be, if he's in the right system, especially a fantastic pro, an every down wide receiver. He blocks. He's big. He's strong. And I think it's a shame that injuries kind of did what they did to him his senior season, because he's a guy who ever since he was a freshman redshirting at Tennessee, I said, I like this kid. I like this kid a lot. This kid needs to play at some point. And I think he could be really, really good as a pro. And Jalen Hyatt, I think he's one of the fastest players around. I think he'll probably run a faster 40 at the UT Pro Day than he did when he was at the Combine. I think we all expected a bigger number there. Not that 4.4 is bad. There's nothing wrong with that. But we've seen the tape on this kid, and he's got football speed. He can run by you. If you get him in the right kind of system, you get him in a little bit of space, he can create a lot of problems. He's not big. He's always going to be a bit thin, not like Tillman, who's kind of built like a power forward. But Hyatt is a guy who I think will be a good pro. And I think Tillman, I'm not an NFL GM. I'm not an NFL coach. I just think the guy, to me, for the past 3 years has looked like an NFL wide receiver, like a plug and play guy.
Jalen Hyatt, fresh off of accepting the Belindikoff Award this weekend, so clearly pretty decent at playing the wide receiver position. Interested to see where those two guys land. Hey, we've got about 100 people watching right now, only 20 likes. Would love to get that ratio up a little bit, so hit that like button. It looks just like this, just like a thumbs up. Smash that like button. We've got to talk about, of course, the guy throwing those two passes for the last few years, and that is Hendon Hooker. I mean, what a prospect that these evaluators have to look at. It's not just, again, we talked about the type of offense that he played in, but also coming off of the injury. That's going to factor into things as well. But overall, we've seen how much the quarterback position has changed, not just from the way that it's played, but the way that it's evaluated. So, Chris, how have you seen the way that quarterbacks are evaluated change over the years, and how that necessarily would apply to a guy like Hendon Hooker?
It has changed so much in the last 5 to 7 years. I always use Patrick Mahomes as kind of the guy that changed everything, where he was coming from an air raid offense, made a lot of bad decisions in college, wasn't the most accurate. The offense was very simple. It was one read and then run, not a lot of getting through his progressions, and Patrick Mahomes has become the unquestioned best quarterback in football. And since then, guys like Josh Allen and Justin Herbert have entered the league. You have to have the ability to push the football down the field. Teams are looking for those splash plays. Not to say that you can't have those meticulous 8, 10, 12 play drives, but teams, their analytics departments, they understand the importance of hitting that 20-plus yard play. And certainly that was a specialty of Hendon Hooker over the last 2 years, throwing to Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman. So because of that, it certainly helps Hendon Hooker's cause. If he was entering the NFL, say 10 years ago, I think he'd be probably a day 3 pick because of the offensive simplicity. But because, like Carl was saying, there's not that many offenses that are the old school style 7-step drop, get through your reads. It's really wide open for a lot more offenses today. That bodes well for Hendon Hooker, even coming off the ACL tear.
Hendon Hooker's biggest thing to overcome is questions about his injury. I think that Josh Heupel does a very good job preparing quarterbacks for the NFL. Drew Lock is a guy, he coached as the offensive coordinator at the University of Missouri, and he hasn't lit the world on fire, but he has been a starter in the league. Hendon Hooker can make the throws. He understands sight adjustments. He understands coverage. He uses his athletic ability as an added bonus, not as the first part of his game. He looks to throw the ball first. And I think that if he's healthy, he's going to be a good starter in the National Football League. And I think when we look at offenses like the one Josh Heupel runs, I don't think that's an indictment for quarterbacks anymore. Many NFL coaches have adjusted to the quarterback and the players that guys are giving them from college. And I think Hendon Hooker is going to be just fine in the National Football League.
Yeah, Wes, you have an interesting perspective on this because you've seen just his growth from, transferring into Tennessee, being the backup, being thrust into the starting role, and then obviously doing what he did this year, which is being just so close to a Heisman finalist. So what have you noticed about his growth that's made him now an NFL prospect?
I think people, and I noticed this when he went down with that ACL tear against South Carolina, you just get all these thoughts going through your head. Like, I don't know that I've ever seen a kid deserve an injury less than he deserved one in that moment. And I just wondered what it was going to do to his stock. But I kept saying, guys, wait until the Senior Bowl, wait until the Combine. All you have to do is get in the room with this kid, and you want this kid on your team. And I want to say kid, he's a man. I mean, gosh, he's what, 24, 25 years old? I mean, he's a man. And he's been that way since he was about 17, 18 years old. He is just someone who conducts himself in a way that you want your franchise quarterback to conduct himself. Everything about this kid, his entire family, they are pure class. And as a player, I think he's showing you the past couple of years what he can do. He's been through a lot. I think his health stuff at Virginia Tech toward the end of his career there there was an issue there with COVID and some heart stuff, and there was some concern. But he ended up fighting through it, comes to Tennessee, thinks he's going to get the job, doesn't get the job. Then Joe Milton hurts his knee, and boom, Hendon Hooker ends up being than even Tennessee thought he was going to be. And the throws that he can make, the decisions, the way that he is in the pocket. I mean, football, there's different systems and there's different ways. You talked about the throwing lanes in Tennessee's offense. That is very valid. That is true. Running a lot under center, also true in some respects. But there are things he does once the ball is snapped that I don't know how you can coach. the way that he sees the pocket, the way that he evades pressure, how smooth he is. He is so much more athletic than people think he is, just because he kind of like Arian Foster did when he was at Tennessee, just kind of glides. He just kind of glides. It doesn't look like he's sweating, doesn't look like he's working hard, but he's getting past you. And he's doing a lot of things that, especially the way the game is played today, are a perfect fit. And honestly, he's not that much older than Will Levis. So I think we need to stop talking about that.
Yeah, 25 years old, and that is, as you said, seen as a knock on him as well. But there's also the medical side of things, and it does sound like he got some positive reviews at the Combine when he was there. I think Chris can speak a little bit more on that. But Chris, I just have a very simple question. Where does he get taken? When?
Somewhere on day 2 of the draft. Had he not torn the ACL so late in the season, even if it was earlier in the season, he probably would have been a back half of the first round selection. I do think there will be some time for him to transition to a more modern day NFL offense. For as much as there is more spread proponents in the offense, it's not going to be exactly what he had at Tennessee. But to draw 2 parallels, I'll go Cedric Tillman reminds me a lot of George Pickens in his college career. And how about Jalen Hurts for Hendon Hooker? To go from Alabama to Oklahoma, show growth as a passer in that final season, gets overlooked a little bit, doesn't have a crazy big arm, isn't a ridiculously freaky athlete, but certainly could run. I kind of see similarities with Hendon Hooker. Different body types, and again, not a crazy athlete, doesn't have the Patrick Mahomes arm, but changing programs, then taking that program to new heights, kind of like Jalen Hurts did there with Oklahoma in that final season with Lincoln Riley. I see kind of a similar draft range, and if he's in the right scenario, I could see Hendon Hooker having an early start to his career that is very comparable to Jalen Hurts.
Interesting. I think that there's some parallels you can make, too, with the leadership of both of those quarterbacks, the situations that they stepped into, transferring, all of those things. All right, so this is not an NFL draft show, so I'm not going to lay out the trade proposal and everything that was that went down this past weekend, but a major trade. I mean, when the number 1 overall pick is traded, you definitely got to talk about it. It doesn't matter if you're an NFL show or not. So the Panthers are now on the clock, and Chris, your mock draft has them taking Anthony Richardson, number 1 overall. Please state your case for how you came to that conclusion.
Okay, here's my case that a lot of people have been thinking that Frank Reich, during his time with the Colts, was coaching a lot of pocket passers. But early on, he coached Andrew Luck, who certainly was an amazing pocket passer. But look back at Andrew Luck's combine. He was big and one of the most athletic quarterbacks in the league early in his Colts career. I think with Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, 2 high-end quarterback prospects, I like them a lot. They have high floors, and I just don't know if they have the same upside as Anthony Richardson. And frankly, I don't think Richardson's floor is that low, because at the very worst, he's going to be one of the most dangerous running quarterbacks in the NFL. At 6'4", 244 with the 4.43 speed, the big time explosion that we saw in the vertical and the broad jump, and just over the last 2 years at Florida. If you're going to trade up that much, I would rather them roll the dice if you're the Panthers and say, let's aim for the moon here at the quarterback position with someone that has the talent in Anthony Richardson that can be coached by a former NFL quarterback that has tons of experience coaching Carson Wentz and Nick Foles, other big-bodied quarterbacks that could maybe get the most and accentuate Anthony Richardson's talents.
Okay, I know Carl has something to say about this, but before Carl presents his argument, I want to clarify with you. Is this a prediction of what you think Carolina will do or what you think they should do?
It's what they should do, and
okay.
I should have clarified that at the beginning. I'm a big Anthony Richardson fan and his pro projects. Yeah.
Okay, Carl, your response.
Chris, did you just compare Anthony Richardson to Andrew Luck, one of the smoothest passers of our generation at quarterback? Secondly, when you look
athletically, I think they are. They're similar.
The word upside, Chris, has gotten many coaches fired. That's the one word that gets many coaches fired. We talked about his ability to run. The Baltimore Ravens have just showed you that in the National Football League with Lamar Jackson, the ability to run doesn't get you paid. It doesn't get you a long-term contract. You can't go with Anthony Richardson over Bryce Young, over C.J. Stroud, over guys that have showed that they can consistently pass the football and complete passes. That's what you have to be able to do in the National Football League. It's great that you can run around, but on third down, on game-winning drives, can you sit in the pocket, analyze the defense, and make the throws that you need to make? Anthony Richardson has not on a consistent basis shown you that he can do that. But Bryce Young, with one of the most mediocre groups of wide receivers that Alabama has had in a very long time over the last couple of years, with the exception of Jamison Williams, he can continuously deliver time and time again. You going with upside, that'll get you fired. Having a quarterback that's going to run around and not be consistent with his arm in the passing game, guess what? Gets you fired. I don't know how you can trade all of that value to go with Anthony Richardson as the number one pick. If you do, we'll be talking about a new coach in the future in Carolina.
Well, that is certainly the logical counter to any take on Anthony Richardson going ahead of Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. But Carl, you did talk about traits earlier in the draft, and I think Anthony Richardson's traits, we'd all agree, are way more phenomenal than Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. And I'm looking at Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, Patrick Mahomes. Not that Anthony Richardson is anywhere near those quarterbacks in terms of his passing ability, but that's what the modern day franchise quarterback looks like and can do athletically. You want to model your game and try to beat those quarterbacks at the next level. I would want to roll the dice if I'm Frank Reich and say, I trust myself. Developing what you said, Carl, does matter more than anything else. His ability to make accurate throws and good decisions from inside the pocket, because you can't coach his speed and his explosion at his size.
When I was a high school coach, I sat in the office with Mike Leach, and he told me you can't teach accuracy. He said a quarterback can either complete passes accurately or he can't. I'm going to always stay in that line of thinking. You compare them to guys like Trevor Lawrence, guys like Patrick Mahomes, who are two of the most accurate passers that we've seen. You can keep talking about his traits. You keep talking about his athletic ability, but he plays quarterback. He doesn't play wide receiver or tailback. So you're forgetting the most important stat of them all: his completion percentage, his touchdown to interception ratio, and his ability to pass the ball down the field. He hasn't shown that to be worthy of the number one pick in the draft.
I love this discussion, but we've got to bring in Wes. Wes, you watched both of these quarterbacks in person this year. What's your take on this?
Well, I totally buy the Anthony Richardson upside argument, because the day I saw him this season in person was the best I think he's probably ever played in his entire career. I think Tennessee's secondary had something to do with that, if I'm being honest, but boy, he was good that day. With that said, I don't know, especially if I'm trading the farm to get somebody, I would want to make sure that I didn't regret it. And I don't think that you'll regret having Bryce Young. I think there's a chance you could end up regretting having Richardson, but boom or bust. But I know what I would be getting with Bryce Young. I know that he's small, and I don't care. His pocket presence is something that is so unbelievably rare for a kid that age. His understanding of the game, I really think he's got eyes on the front, back, left, and right of his head. He sees everything all the time. He is a special talent, and everything you hear about him behind the scenes is good too. So especially if I'm trading the farm to get to that number one pick, I would want Bryce Young, because I would feel like I wouldn't regret that one. Whereas Richardson, I might end up looking like a genius, or I might get fired. With Bryce Young, I know I'm not getting fired.
I like it. It kind of goes into the discussion that we just had, Chris, about the evaluation of quarterbacks and how Patrick Mahomes kind of reset the market. I feel like a guy like Josh Allen, too, coming out of Wyoming with a 56% completion percentage, also makes people maybe less, wary about drafting a guy that has that low completion percentage. It is March, which means that it is March Madness. We've got games coming up tomorrow. I'm very excited about it, but again, this is not an NFL draft show. This is not a college basketball show. I'm just saying everything that it's not. But we do want to play into it a little bit, and we're all very excited about the Final Four. So along those lines, we're going to ask our guests to present their Final Four. Chris, we're going to have you go first here, and it is your Final Four of the scariest prospects in the NFL draft. Take it away.
All right, I will start with Bryce Young's teammate, Will Anderson. I've likened him to Khalil Mack since that freshman season when he looked like a future top 5 pick, has the ridiculous second season, 17 sacks, 31 tackles for loss. Wasn't quite as productive this past season, but there was a lot more attention. thrown his way on that Alabama defensive line. He's squeaky clean off the field as well. He didn't run crazy fast at the combine, but Khalil Mack didn't either. I think they're very similar players. He's going to be scary for any offensive line, any offensive coordinator that he faces. After that, I'll go with Devin Achane from Texas A&M, the running back, who ran 4.32 at the combine. And what I like about Achane is that a lot of these smaller speed backs are usually gadget guys. They're usually the complementary piece in college. They don't get a lot of carries. He went over 1,000 yards this past season and was really the feature back on, again, not a great Aggie team, but Achane himself showed the ability to catch the football, 65 catches in his career at Texas A&M. And when he's in space, no one's catching him. So I think in today's NFL, running back position is a little bit devalued. Teams want to wait. They don't get a Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs from Alabama. The speed of Devin Achane, 4.32, should really scare teams. Then I'll go back to defense. Kalijah Kancey from Pittsburgh. I think Kancey is the best pure pass rusher in the draft class. With Jalen Carter and Will Anderson, you get more run defense, you get really good pass rush, but just pure getting up the field, winning with athleticism, with burst, with pass rush moves, deceptive speed to power. I see shades of Aaron Donald. He's not quite as long and not quite as powerful, but Kalijah Kancey in an NFL today where you needed to get to the quarterback in under 2.5 seconds, that's where Kalijah Kancey really thrives, getting quick pressure. He's another one like Will Anderson that will be very scary when those teams are game planning pretty early in the week. And lastly, I'm going to go off the radar. I'm going to go Corey Trice, the cornerback from Purdue. And why he's scary, 6'3", 32-inch arms, almost 33-inch arms, built like a safety, built like an old school strong safety, but 5 years he played at Purdue. And outside of Brian Branch from Alabama, it seems like everything's coming back to Alabama here on this Tennessee show. Outside of Brian Branch, Corey Trice to me is the best tackling cornerback or defensive back in this class. And for teams that want to get those running backs on the outside, use the screen game, they like to kind of zero in on these cornerbacks who are not good tacklers. With that tackling radius and that size, I think Corey Trice in kind of a zone heavy scheme can be one of those later round picks, 3rd, 4th, 5th round, who can become a really good player and surprise people at the next level.
I like it. All right. So if you're a fan of an NFL team and, maybe a division rival drafts one of those guys, you should be afraid. Be very afraid. Chris, thank you so much for being on the show today. We appreciate the time.
Thanks, guys.
All right. As Chris said, this Tennessee show, as we're calling it, continues here. And check out the rest of my interview with head coach Josh Heupel. Coach, thank you again for taking some time with spring ball in full swing. Along those lines, I know you want competition at every single position, but when it comes to the quarterback position in particular, there's also something to be said, about letting a guy know that he's the guy, establishing that leadership and that confidence. So how have the guys currently competing for that starting job managed the battle and that dynamic so far?
Well, I think it is important that everybody has the opportunity to reset, grow, and compete for a job. I think that's what spring ball is. I think that's the early part of training camp too. We're talking about the mid-years. They're going to be completely different players by the time we get to training camp than where they start and really where they finish spring ball as well. So you got to let players grow and earn the opportunity to play and showcase that they're going to compete at a championship level. And then it's our job as a staff to find roles to put those guys in a position to go succeed in all 3 phases of the game. While you're doing that, you can compete really hard with yourself, but with the other guys that are in that room and still love one another and still have great chemistry and energy inside of the position room and the unit battles that take place. And I think that's one of the things that we've been able to do and manage and create here at Tennessee in a really short amount of time. The fact that everybody got a chance to see the relationship that Hendon and Joe had a year ago and how they pushed each other, competed with each other, but did it in a positive way. They were both better for it. They've both grown and both had a great amount of success. So we can manage that in the quarterback room. We can do that at all the other positions as well.
100%. I have some big picture college football questions here. First, Spire Sports continues to get mentioned among the top collectives in the country. How has the success that they've had maybe make your job a little bit easier?
Well, I think, the brand of the Power Tee the passion of our fan base, the city that we reside in Knoxville, one of the coolest college cities in all of America, the opportunities that are provided for them outside of the game, just, professional and personal development here. They can see those opportunities. And obviously, with that fan support comes great opportunities for our games. With the current legislation inside of NIL, for those guys to have real value and have real opportunity here. And I think you put all of those things together, this is a really powerful experience. Spire Sports has done a great job with our current players.
As the game continues to evolve, the NCAA recently proposed some rule changes meant to sped up the game. Now, I'm sure for you, and really for me, the Alabama game felt like it lasted 10 hours. In reality, it was just 5-minute shorts of 4, but that was just during the regulation period. It's still pretty lengthy, though. So based on how you play football and the tempo style of offense you have, how would these potential rule changes affect the way that you coach in game?
Yeah, depending which ones actually get passed, they may have some effect, and some of them may not have any effect on how we actually coach during the course of the game. The clock, no matter what they decide, is going to be the same for both sides, both teams during the course of play. And so there may be some subtle tweaks to what we do, but all in all, if there's more consistency in the length of the game, I think it's probably a positive for college football.
Speaking of that game last season, your team was able to exercise a lot of demons last fall, topping Florida for just the second time in 18 years, taking down Alabama for the first time in over a decade and a half. So how does getting over the hump, per se, allow you to set even greater expectations for this fall?
Yeah, the expectations inside of our room really haven't changed a whole lot from really after we had worked and competed before we got to our first regular season here. We compete, we do things the right way. We're going to love one another and believe that we're going to put ourselves in the best position to go out and win. And from season 1 to season 2, the difference was just our work habits and our consistency in those things, where this football team a year ago expected to go win those games. And what we have done in the first part of our offseason, these guys have continued to grow in their daily habits and accountability to one another. They continue to work and strive for greatness every single day. Really proud of some of the changes that individuals and collectively that we've made as a football team. And at the end of the day, believe that we're going to have a football team that, we go prepare the right way. We'll have a chance to win each Saturday, that we strap up our chin straps and get ready to go compete.
All right, I got one more question for you here. Would love to be able to speak to you in person, but the cool part about doing it virtually is I get kind of a look into what's going on in your office. Do you have a favorite piece of memorabilia in there? Is there maybe a piece of the goalpost in there?
There is not a piece of the goalpost. That's something that I haven't been able to acquire yet. I got Bill Martin working on that for me here during the off season. But there's a piece of some Orange Bowl history in the other part of my office, and certainly from the Alabama game as well.
Yeah, you got some pretty cool photos back there too. I'm sure you had to get a whole new set based on last season. Coach, thank you again so much for the time.
Hey, I always appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me on, and go Big Orange.
All right. Appreciated being able to talk to the head coach there. A lot of people in the chat enjoying it as well. We also had a poll. I want to just say the results there. We talked about who the #1 overall pick should be. And by quite a bit, C.J. Stroud actually won, which is a guy that we did not discuss that often, but I'm not going to open up a whole new can of worms because we're going to discuss what Josh Heupel just said. But as a reminder, again, a lot of people watching would love to get to 100 likes by the end of the show. So if you have not already, smash that like button. Guys, I want to throw out the question that I just asked Coach there. I'll start with you, Carl. What's a favorite piece of memorabilia that you got back there? Few photos of coaches. Just a few.
My office is like a museum, but I have to tell you, we've spent a lot of time today talking about the University of Tennessee, but we haven't talked about the best university in the state of Tennessee, which is my alma mater.
There we go.
Yeah.
The Governors. Let's go, P. And I know this isn't a college basketball show, but I want to give a shout out to my former classmate, Corey Gibson, on being named the head basketball coach at Austin Peay State University. He's going to get Clarksville rocking again and get us back into the big dance. We got a lot of great history, and we are the best university in the state of Tennessee. Let's go, P.
I like it. Wes,
Definitely
what
got the
about
best
you?
chance.
That's
They definitely got the best
top,
chant, the
top
flies open,
chant.
let's go pee.
Let's
You
go.
can't top it. You can't top it, But I would say I have an autographed baseball card from my great uncle Rabbit Moranville, who was a Hall of Famer. Actually,
Wow.
the worst hitter who was not a pitcher in the Baseball Hall of Fame. My great uncle, yeah. So yeah, that's probably the coolest thing. I got a bunch of other Cubs memorabilia and stuff in here, and some Arsenal stuff, but I think I'll stick in the family there and go with Uncle Rabbit. So also one of the kookiest characters in the history of baseball. So if you want to look up Rabbit Moranville and the hijinks he used to pull back in the day, the apple didn't far fall from the tree. We're all pretty weird in our family.
I like it. Okay, a little piece of history from both of you guys. I am not in an office right now, and I do not have an office, so I don't really have anything to show with my memorabilia. But I do enjoy looking in the back of your guys' backgrounds to see the fun things that are happening there. Let's actually talk about some football, though. That's why we're here on this show. We're going to talk a little bit more Tennessee. I'm sorry, Carl, we did not squeeze in a little Austin Peay conversation into the show today, but I got to ask about this quarterback battle. Obviously, the head coach was not going to tell me who the starter was going to be or who's winning that competition. But Wes, you are there. You've seen Nico on campus for a few months now. Obviously, seen the growth of Joe Milton over the last few years. What's the status of that quarterback competition right now?
I think the official status is that it's open. The unofficial status is that it would be a lot easier for Tennessee if Joe Milton, as a senior, would go ahead and take charge of this thing and go forward. I think that's probably the best case scenario for Tennessee, is that Joe Milton ends up being the Joe Milton that everybody thinks he could be. Because I've said this will be the third year now, I have no idea how good Joe Milton can be, but I darn sure want to see him try to get there. Because this kid has arm talent that I don't know that I've ever seen at this level. And I mean that. I'm not exaggerating. Just the pure arm strength, the power. You go back to someone like Jamarcus Russell, Brody Coyle back in the day. Some of the throws that Joe Milton can make from the angles he can make them are just unbelievable. And Nico Iamaleava is a fantastic talent. I think he's going to have a really good career at Tennessee. And who knows, he could end up being the guy this year. But I think for Tennessee, the simplest thing would be for the vet to go ahead and take the job and run with it for now, and then let Nico do some mop-up stuff.
Joe Milton has legendary arm strength, can make all the throws. He seems to be the incumbent and the guy that has the best chance to do it. But I'm going to tell you guys, if I pay a dude $8 million, man, he's going to have to do something. He's going to have to kick PATs, deep snap, hold, punt. He's going to have to do something for me if I'm putting that kind of money into him. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see Nico. But Joe Milton does have all of the things that you need from a talent standpoint. People are expecting big things out of him. But when we got NIL involved and when we started paying these kids money, don't ever take for granted when somebody makes that kind of investment in a guy that they want to see him play.
Wes, how much do you think that matters in this quarterback competition? How much do they weigh, that kind of NIL, and not just that, but him being a high-profile quarterback coming in? How much pressure is there to push him towards that starting job sooner rather than later?
I don't know how much pressure there really is. Those might be famous last words, but I think, in my opinion, if you want to keep your locker room content, and that's the thing that should matter the most, right? It's the kids out there on the field. I think if you want to keep your locker room happy, the players on that team will know who the quarterback should be. The players in that team will practice every day, the offense, the defense, they will know who the quarterback should be. And if the guy who maybe doesn't have an $8 million NIL deal, allegedly, is the guy who ends up winning the starting job because he's the guy who can give that team the best chance to win games, that's going to be the guy who plays, or at least the guy who should be playing. So I think you separate the two things. I think obviously there's a chance that they could come together. We don't know exactly how this is all going to work. No one really does, to be honest. Mm-hmm. They might say they do, but they don't know. I don't know. No one knows. But I do think it's something you have to consider. But at the end of the day, you got to play the best guy. And if that's Joe Milton, that's Joe Milton. If that's Nico Iamaleava, that's Nico Iamaleava.
I agree with Wes from this standpoint. You play the best guy, you play the guy that wins the locker room, but that guy has to knock the guy out that's getting all the money. It can't be a close deal. It can't come down to the wire. He has to put some distance, some separation, with some maturity, and it has to be no doubt that he is the guy. Or I don't care what anybody says. Money talks and BS runs a marathon. When you paying these guys this kind of money, people want to see them play, man, and it has to be a major difference in the two to keep the guy making the money on the bench.
And I do
And
like.
the first time
Go
that
ahead.
Joe Milton doesn't do well, they're going to say they're going to want him anyway. The first time Joe Milton struggles in a game, if it's Florida, whatever it is, I can tell you right now, the fans are going to want Nico because the backup quarterback's always the most popular person in this city. But I think that, you know, it's if Joe Milton does the thing, he does the thing.
Especially considering what the backup quarterback did last year. Definitely there will be some calls for Nico if that's the case. But I do like what Josh Heupel said in that, you know, the dynamic that you saw from Joe Milton and Hendon Hooker last year really set the standard for what a quarterback room at Tennessee should look like, and there is that mutual respect, that understanding that if one guy goes down, that next one is ready. It's a healthy competition, but also when you have that good leadership, when you have that good culture set in place, that these competitions can be, you know, a little bit easier, and they can actually make each other better. And it's not a situation of where they're, you know, it's a contentious competition. How about on the other side of the ball, Wes? I know that there's a lot of question marks when it comes to Tennessee's defense. Obviously, it's tough to live up to the hype that they've got on offense. But how does this unit catch up and maybe get a little bit more equal with what all the success that they're having on offense?
Number one, Emily, secondary. Number two, secondary. Number three, secondary.
Okay.
They need to get better on the back end. I think they are okay up front defensively. I think they've got some young edge rushers who are really potentially special players, and they got a couple more that have come in this class too. They've got some really good young edge rushers. They got a bunch of vets on that D line. Aaron Beasley at linebacker is a good player. They got a couple of young linebackers who I think are going to be pretty solid players. And they brought in the transfer from BYU, who I think is a really mature, older, physical linebacker who's going to help them a good bit. So it all comes down to the back end. The secondary last season was not good. It wasn't. I can't think of a charitable, kind way to put that. It was not good most of the time. They've got to get better there. I think they have a chance to, and they need to, because it's really hard to know you can score 50 points in a game, but to know you might have to do that to win, that's a different story. They've got to get better in coverage. They got to get better with their reads. They got to get better playing the ball in the air. They got to do a lot of things to fix that secondary.
The best way to fix the secondary and to fix the defense, Emily and Wes, is recruiting. They just have to continue to recruit at a high level, top tier high school guys, top level transfer portal guys. Let people know it's exciting to play at the University of Tennessee again. Georgia has dominated defensively. Before that, Alabama's run great defense. It was more about their ability to recruit the best players in the country than it necessarily was about them running an innovative scheme. So I think that Tennessee just needs to continue to build their footprint. Josh Heupel has the program exciting again. And so as long as they continue to recruit at a high level, they'll get their defense moving in the right direction.
And the main reason that I asked the question the way that I did is because there's a certain, you know, kind of ceiling that this defense can get to based on the tempo style of offense. I mean, they're 9th in the nation when it comes to plays that defense had to endure last year. I mean, 991 plays. That's a lot. It's exhausting. It's not just having the talent, but it's having the depth as well, because you're rotating through a lot of guys. But in the grand scheme of things, I mean, if you look at their scoring defense, 5th in the SEC. So outside of maybe that South Carolina aberration of the 63 points that were scored, this was actually a fairly solid unit. And so you do anticipate that with the recruiting, like you said, Carl, outside of Nico, you look at this class up and down. You know that the target for this last cycle was to build up on the defensive side of the ball. And so you knew that that was an expectation, and I think that they did a good job of checking some of those boxes as well. But overall, when you look at this Tennessee program, and, you know, talking to Josh Heupel about all the demons that they exercised last year and getting some of those big wins. Wes, what do you think some other programs, I like to refer to them as get-back programs, the programs that want to get back to the glory days, like a Tennessee, like a Nebraska, like a Colorado. What can those programs learn from how Tennessee was able to rebuild as quickly as they did?
I think that there was one word that Josh Heupel said in his first press conference, and you know, I covered Butch Jones and all that stuff for years, and so some of that sort of PR speak just kind of triggers me a little bit, to be honest with you. But I think that the word he used was connection. and it is a very, very important word. Connection, and I would say trust is number two. You have to build connection. If you're a coach coming into a program because they've not won enough, they're probably not going to have the pieces to do everything you want to do at the beginning. So you have to maximize what you have. You have to be able to be flexible with what you do in order to fit the roster you have, and you have got to get buy-in. You have got to let these players take advantage of a blank slate. Let the skeletons in the closet stay in the closet. Let them go back there, be what they were. It's a new start for everybody when a new coaching staff comes in, which should be a little bit of a pep in the step for not just starters, but for guys who weren't playing as much. There were guys who the previous staff may have even pushed to the portal, who guys that this staff came in and said, no, wait, we can make something out of this. We have something to work with here. And I think that the connection, the trust, the buy-in, and you have to be genuine, because if you're a coach who's come into a situation where the team's not good, you don't just have to make them better players. You have to make them stronger, sort of psychologically and mentally. You have to make them believe in you, believe in themselves. And to do that, it might require some corny stuff along the way, but you have got to get buy-in, because if you don't get that buy-in immediately, you're going to regress right back to what you were. You have to change behaviors. You have to change mindset. And to do that, you got to be genuine, or those players are going to see right through you.
I think that Josh Heupel knows what his identity is, Emily, and I think that that's what sets him apart and why he's able to go in and turn around a program the way he is. He knows what he wants to do offensively. He has a staff that's been consistent. Guys like Glenn Ellerby, his offensive line coach, has been with him for a really long time since he was an offensive coordinator at Mizzou. That helps him install his offense and install his principles. We haven't seen guys win national championships that play with this style of offense. It might be good to upset Alabama one week, but I don't know consistently if you can put your defense in these kind of binds. But one thing I do know about Josh Heupel, we will find out, because that's the way that he plays, and that's the style of football that he believes in. And he stayed true to that and been very consistent. And when you are consistent, when you know what your identity is, it's easy for people to believe in you because they know what they're going to get out of you every single day.
I think one word I want to throw out there too is tone. And I think people think when you look at setting the tone, it's setting that tone of hard work and leadership and all of these things. I think for Josh Heupel, it was him understanding the tone of what the program needed. You mentioned going through everything with Butch Jones and all the coaching searches and everything that happened with Jeremy Pruitt with the NCAA investigation. It was a heavy time for what was left of the Tennessee roster. I mean, a lot of them transferred out as well. And so I think Josh Heupel came in and understood that the tone needed to be to have fun again, to play football again, to enjoy what you're doing. And so I think he did a really good job of setting that tone early and understanding what this group needed, what this program needed, what this fan base needed. And, you know, the winning and the success and stuff comes along with it. But understanding what was needed in that time when he stepped into the role was something that was super important, and that other programs can hopefully learn from, and we can get more of those get back programs and get them back. All right, Final Four time. Wes, your Final Four here is the most impactful players returning in 2023. What do you got?
Well, I'll go number one. I will go defensive lineman Omari Thomas, a guy who I thought honestly had a chance to go pro after last season. This is a guy who is big, physical, strong, great leader, also great hands, good against the run, can get in there in the pass a little bit. I think he's a really good player, and I think he's going to be a pro for a long time. I'd go second, Brew McCoy, the wide receiver, another guy who had a chance. Maybe he could have gone pro after last season, but he decided to come back, be the number one, be WR1. I think he's a guy who is big, physical, strong, can run a little bit. He can high point the ball like Tillman could. This guy looks like a linebacker in pads. He is a really physical specimen, a big dude, and I think he's going to have a big season at Tennessee if he stays healthy. Number three, I go Aaron Beasley, the linebacker. I think he's maybe the most underrated player on this football team. I think last season, as the year progressed, people realized, wait a minute, that guy's always around the ball. That guy's always around the ball. Former safety in high school, guy who's gotten a little bit bigger, still a bit undersized, but he flies around, he plays hard, and he's kind of the central figure a little bit to that defense. And four, I'm going to go Joe Milton III. I think this is a guy who, let's not forget, 2 years ago, Tennessee thought, and this was the thinking of the staff at the time, you know, we could always go to Hendon Hooker if we need to, and we know we'll be pretty good. But if that Milton kid is what we think he could be, we could win double-digit games. This was a couple years ago. This guy has, I mean, there is nothing physically with the talent, with the arm this guy doesn't have. I think best arm talent that I think I've probably ever seen. He's a really popular player in the locker room, popular player with the coaching staff. Everybody likes him. They like being around him. He's kind of one of those guys that you want first off the bus. When you roll up somewhere to play an away game. We'll see, the proof's in the pudding, but I think he is a guy who a lot of people in this program would love to see have success.
100%. We got, speaking of percentages, we got a poll going here. Realistic expectations for Tennessee in 2023. This is in the chat, by the way. Again, the only way you can access the chat is by subscribing to the channel. We got 13% say they're going to lose in the SEC title game. We have 13% saying they're going to win the SEC. 27% says they're playing for a college football playoff, and the winner here with 45% not making an SEC title game. Yeah, pretty difficult when you've got the back-to-back defending national champs in the East. Tough to get to that SEC title. We're going to finish here with our college football today takeaways. We'll let the guest go first. Wes, this is just a final takeaway that you've got from today. Maybe something you learned.
Well, I've been trying to learn a lot because I've got kind of multi-sport brain right now. I'm heading down to Orlando tomorrow. Yeah. Tennessee baseball is ranked second or third in the country. We got to cover all their games these days. I got a lot of things going through my mind right now, but it's nice to remember that spring football does start soon. And I think the culture within that team, it did take me back a little bit when I had to list the 4 impactful returning guys on the team. There were some tough calls in there. There were some guys who, I think that they've got probably they got a lot to prove. Some of these newcomers, they got to step in and play. There are some holes in this roster that they got to fix. And when you're the only team in the East that's got to play Bama every year, that's going to make it tougher for you to get to the SEC title game. I think we just have to call that what it is. It's one of the best rivalries in Southern football, but it doesn't help Tennessee get to the title game. It just doesn't, because Georgia's not going anywhere either. So I think this program, it's going to depend a whole lot on what number 7 does. And if it's not going to be number 7, is it going to be the freshman? Can Joe Milton do part of what Hendon Hooker did last season? Because they can be better on defense, and I think they will be, but you're going to have to score points because that defense isn't going to be good enough for you to just bank on that to win games. They're going to need Joe Milton to be the Joe Milton they think he can be. And if not, after halfway through the season or so, they're going to have to think about making a change to Nico. We'll see.
Carl?
Well, I learned today that Wes's uncle is one of the quirkiest baseball players of all time, and that I'm going to get off of this show and I'm going to Google him because I'm very interested to see what was some of the antics that Wes said that he pulled off. I also learned today, Emily, that you don't have an office. So I got to help you out with that. We got to get on the phone with Adam Stanko. We got to get on the phone with Mr. Proud at the house, and we got to figure out why Emily doesn't have an office to put her memorabilia. I don't understand. I'm lost on that. We got to get on the phone and get you taken care of.
I appreciate that. I do enjoy.
I'm just happy my toddler didn't cry downstairs during this entire thing. We got a corgi down there who stayed quiet too for an hour. It's unbelievable.
That's all right. I do enjoy the placement of my cubicle, though. I'm right by the window. I got a nice little view, so I'm content. I'm also hearing in my ear Adam Stanko is in the control room and says that is quote not happening. So I appreciate the attempt, Carl. My final takeaway is that it takes 8 months of me working here before I get a show completely dedicated to the University of Tennessee. So I got some success there. It only took 8 months, guys, and here we are talking about my hometown team. So thank you all for the great discussion today. For Vols fans watching right now, you can check out more coverage on Go Vols 24/7. Wes and the gang does tons of great work. I'm on that site frequently. There are lots of great stories that you can read, not just about the football program, but as you said, Wes, baseball team is red hot. Basketball team's hitting the NCAA tournament, so go check that out. Thank you both for the great discussions today. Again, we are here every Monday and Wednesday on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel at 5 o'clock. So we'll see you Wednesday.